Hello, you fantastic Godot people. In this video, we're going to create story objects. Now, you've noticed on the slide it says StoryBook option 1. I'm going to show you a couple of different ways we could do this, but what I want to do is separate my data from my script. My script is the things that run the functions, right? That tells Godot how to behave. The data is the things I'm going to plug into that. And I don't need them in the same place. If I take a look at my script, you'll see from line 5 to line 38, all of this is just data, right? We could put this somewhere else. And the option we're going to use today is going to make story objects. I'm going to make new nodes that each hold information. So here's what I need to do. First, make Looney Lips less cluttered. And to do that, I'm going to create a new node and call it StoryBook. I want to make each story a separate child of StoryBook, so I can look at the scene tree and see how many stories I have, and the script should be able to scale automatically, so if I add one or take one away, it won't break the script. I also would like each story to use the same script. I don't really want a new script to hold data for every single story. Let's take a look at what we mean. First thing I'm going to do, go into Looney Lips and create a new node. I'm going to press Ctrl A and double click on node. This is the most basic kind of node in Godot. The only things it can do Control pause and hold a script, right? That's it. That's all the functionality it has by default. Anything else we'll have to extend. Let's rename this to StoryBook. Hello, StoryBook. And let's give you a child node, which can be another node. I'm going to call this Story0. Cool. Story0, you need a script. Let's give you a script. So, new script. And I'm just going to call it story. Why? Because I don't want a new script for every single story. I want them all to use the same script. First thing I could do, get rid of the function and give it a variable called prompts, which is an array, right? And a variable called story, which I don't need to initialize, but I can. It's a string. Okay, simplest thing I could do, go into Looney Lips, take this prompts and just copy this array in. So I'm going to copy it and paste it. And that will work fine, right? And then I can do the same with the story. Copy it, and paste it. Okay, that will work, but what happens if I want to make a new story? Well, let's save this. If I want to duplicate story0, I could right-click on it and go to duplicate, or I could press Ctrl D, and it'll make the next series in there. So I called this one story0 because the next one will be story1, but they're using the same script. Any change I make in story1, a happy name, is going to show up in story0. It's the same script. And I can see that by going to the properties and seeing what script it's using. So I need a way of using the same script for all 8 of my stories, but having different values in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clear this array. I'm going to keep the array initialized and clear this string. I'm going to keep the string initialized. You'll see why in a second. I'm going to make a new keyword. Just before variable, I'm going to put export. And what this does is it exports the variable to the inspector. Now this is important. And I'm just going to save that. This is important because it means I can change the values for that node in the inspector, but it won't actually change the script. Let me show you what that looks like. Go to 2D view. Let's go to story 1 and write, this is story 1. Story 1. Story 1. Great. And it has here this little circle button. That means set it back to the default. But if I click on story0, it doesn't have that, right? This is story 0. You would use export variables for tweaking values in a script without having to change the actual script, but it also works great for our purposes. So we can put our stories in here, and it'll work great. One thing that isn't ideal is, you see array size 0? Well, I can change the size of the array. Let's say I'm going to give it one value. You see here it says null. It doesn't have a value, and the reason is an array can hold any type of variable. It doesn't know what kind of variable to put in here. Now I can left click on this pencil icon and pick it, right? So this is going to be a string. And now I can type a string. Okay, now let's add another one. And that one's null as well. For every single one, I'm going to have to go on this drop-down menu. And that, frankly, isn't very fun, right? It's going to get boring very quickly. So what I need to do is figure out how to tell Godot this is an array of strings. Now I can't just do this. Why? Because that tells me that the first 2 are strings, but when I want to add another one, it's null, right? All I've done is move the problem along. And I need this to be scalable. We need the precise amount of arrays in there for the story. I need a way of telling it this is a specific type of array that can only take strings. So I'm going to use typed GD script. Let's talk about typed and dynamic GD script really quickly. So here is our default variable box that we keep talking about, right? And it can hold anything. Now, in dynamic languages like Python and default dynamic GD script, it's called dynamic because the variables can change, right? You can put anything in here. This can be an integer at one moment, a string at the next moment, an array at the next, a float at the next, and we can keep changing and changing and changing. If it's typed, it can only hold a single type of variable. This variable is, for example, a string. It can only hold strings. If you try and put an integer in here, it will just stop. It won't work. It'll break. Most of the time, I'm going to be using dynamic GD script, right? Because it's very flexible, it's very easy, it's great for small projects. Typed GD script is usually used for very big projects because it's very easy to lose track of what variable is supposed to be what, and this just keeps it all controlled, right? It doesn't allow things to go too wrong. It's also slightly faster. In large projects, what's happening is Godot is trying to figure out what type of variable this is at runtime every time you use it. And when it gets really, really big, that will slow it down. We're not going to notice it in the projects we're making, but in theory, typed is a little faster. So that's great, but now we have two problems. One, I need to tell you what type of array can only take strings, and two, how to set typed GD script. Well, to set typed GD script, I'm going to go colon, and after the colon, I'm going to tell it the type of variable this is. And the type of array that can only take strings is pool string array. If I hold control and click on it, a pool string array is an array specifically designed to hold string. So this is a kind of an edge case thing, right? But it's going to work great for our purposes. I actually now don't need to initialize it because I've told it it's a pool string array. It can only hold pool strings. And now when I try and add a new value, it's always going to be a string, right? It can never be an integer. In fact, if I try and type a number in here, let's give it another value. This 25 is actually a string. It's not an integer, right? So that's going to work fantastically for our purposes. I could also initialize story as a string as well. That will work fine. And now when I go to story 1, story 2, they're different, right? And it'll work great. So for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out this entire template variable, all of it. I'm going to select it all, press Control K, it's all commented out. And I'm just going to start moving them across. Now, the reason I'm commenting it out is in another video, I'm going to show you another solution to this, so I'm going to keep it here. But once you've moved them, you could just delete this template. Let's move a couple across just to show how this works. So that's my story, it lives in there. And how many do we need? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. We have a name, a noun, an adverb, and an adjective. Now, you can already see that one potential problem here is I can't read the whole story, right? This isn't easy to resize. I could resize this window, but even that isn't ideal, right? That's a little annoying. So copy pasting does make sense here. When we look at the JSON's solution, that's another way we could do this. It's going to make this a little easier to read. However, I'm going to do, should I do 4? I'm going to do 4. So I'm just going to do the same process. I'll show you this one, then I'll fast forward. So this story is, there once was a something called something called something. And that's going to live in a story string. And I need 4 again. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you are a noun, a name, an adjective, and another, another name. Awesome. So I'm going to do those for 2 more, fast forward, and you'll be able to see them. Great, so I've got 4 of my 8 stories here. Remember, we're counting from 0. I've got all of these things plugged in. How do we actually get it to work? Because look, identified template is not declared in the current scope. So let's click on that, see the error. Set current story no longer exists. So I need to change set current story. I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to make a new variable. It's only going to exist in this function because it's the only place it needs to be. And it's going to be called stories. It's going to be all of them. And what I want is I want to get the StoryBook node. And I want to find how many children it's got, right? I need to count them. And to do that, I'm going to get child count. Literally, it's going to say, how many children do you have? And it's going to count them. 0, 1, 2, 3, right? Which is 4. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4 children. It's going to count them. Okay, so now let's select a story. So selected story. And what's this? This is a random story that's a child of StoryBook. How do I do that? Well, I'm going to use random integer. And I'm going to modulate it by the amount of stories we have, right? So it's just going to pick a number between 0 and how many children's StoryBook have. And now I need to select current story. So current story. And I want to go to StoryBook. And I want to get a child of it. And it's going to ask for a number. Which number is it? It's selected story. Okay. Before we go any further, let's just take a quick look what's happening here. I'm actually going to press Control and / to get rid of this handy script list, whatever it's called. So I'm going to saying it that the prompts in current story. So current story is a dictionary. I'm telling it there's now a key called prompts. Okay, so add a key called prompts. And the value of prompts is a child of StoryBook and its child number, whatever selected story is. We've just found that. And now I need to find the prompts key. And I can look in here. Prompts is a pull string array, and it knows what the values are because we've put them in the inspector, right? I can look here. It's going to say, these are my prompts. So it's just going to add them as a pull string array, which is going to behave like an array. And now I'm going to do the same thing. Current story.story equals, and I'm just going to go StoryBook dot get child. So get child number. What number is it? Selected story dot story. Let's just double check that that's what it was called. It is what it was called. Okay, so now this should work. Let's find out. May I have a noun, please? Coffee cup. May I have a name? Priscilla. Priscilla. There we go. May I have an adjective? Confident. Another name. Sam. Hi, Sam. There once was a coffee cup named Priscilla who searched far and wide for the mythical confident noun of Sam. There should actually be another one here, shouldn't it? Noun should be different. Let's fix that story real quick. Put that there. And you should be another name. And you should be another noun. But look, it worked just fine. Now, this can feel like a lot of fiddling around, right? And we're doing some slightly clever things with code. So I'm going to show us what those are in a moment. But let's just talk about the advantages of doing it this way. I've now separated all the data in StoryBook, and I can look at it here. I can even minimize this, and it just keeps all the stories separately. Now, I can go into my script, and I can delete all of these stories. I'm actually going to cut them, which makes this much more readable, right? It's a lot simpler to see what's going on. I'm going to paste these back for now because I'm going to need them in the next video. The disadvantage to this is filling these out is a little bit annoying, and reading the story is a little hard, right? I would probably write it in something like Notepad or something like that and then paste it in. But everything is nice and clean. If I delete story 2, it gets rid of the number, but this works just fine, right? Nothing is going to crash. I have separated everything out, but the game is going to work great. I kind of want that back now, don't I? So can I undo that? Boop. Yep, there it is. Cool. So this is option 1. The disadvantage of this is it means that the player can't add their own stories. Now, if I wanted to do that, I would go with JSON, which is going to be my next video, right? The second option. The other advantage is I can look at this as a human and see how many stories we have, right? We've separated everything out. Okay, and that brings us to the end of the video. In this video, we've looked at exporting variables. We've used getChildCount and getChild to figure out how many children does a node have, and I want to go get this specific node by number. We've also had a quick look at pull string arrays and a brief introduction to TypeGD-script. Now, don't worry if this feels a little bit overwhelming. With practice, this will all become second nature. You're not expected to remember every single function, every single variable. Every programmer I know looks things up. But we have made a really solid start to the game. It's actually feature complete at this point. What we're going to do next is look at a different solution. So, excellent work, and I will see you in the next video.